Welcome to this cap on schedules of reinforcement. Regarding consequences when creating and designing systematic instruction, the schedule of reinforcement per particular behavior specifies whether every response is followed by reinforcement or whether only some responses are followed by reinforcement. A schedule of reinforcement is a protocol or a set of rules that a teacher will follow when delivering reinforcers. The rules might state that reinforcement is given after every correct response to a question, or for every 2 correct responses, or for every 100 correct responses, or when a certain amount of time has elapsed. It seems like an overwhelming concept, but don't panic. Let's discuss it here. We'll start with discussing continuous schedule of reinforcement, or CRF. Within an educational setting, a CRF would mean that the teacher would deliver reinforcement after every correct response from their students. For example, if you were teaching a student to read the letters A, B, C, and D, then every time you presented one of those letters to your students and they correctly read the letter, then you would deliver reinforcement. An everyday example would be changing the channel on your television. When you hit 702 on your television remote control, your TV always changes, so you're reinforced on a CRF schedule. There are also intermittent schedules of reinforcement. Why? Because we need to make reinforcement schedules be more natural. The more natural the schedule, the less likely the behavior is going to be under extinction. Meaning, the behavior can withstand time without receiving reinforcement. A fixed ratio schedule of reinforcement means that the reinforcement should be delivered after a constant or fixed number of correct responses. For example, a fixed ratio schedule of 2 means reinforcement is delivered after every 2 correct responses. You could also have another number, such as 5 or 10. I alluded to this previously in the task analysis cap when I discussed that a more natural schedule of reinforcement for a task analysis would be at the end of the task analysis. You may begin with the CRF, constant reinforcement with every step completed. However, as you thin the schedule of reinforcement, eventually you want to be on a fixed ratio schedule of however many steps are in the task analysis. And just for clarity, a fixed ratio 1 would be the same as what? If you're thinking CRF or constant schedule, continuous schedule of reinforcement, you would be correct. A variable ratio schedule is a schedule of reinforcement where the delivery of reinforcement will vary. However, it has to average out to a specific number. So just like fixed schedule, a variable ratio can be any number, but it has to be defined. And then you will vary that ratio so that ultimately it would average out to the number you have defined, so that the student can anticipate when reinforcement will arrive as easily. It's varied. Additionally, we have interval schedules of reinforcement. A fixed interval schedule means that reinforcement becomes available after a specific period of time. It's abbreviated FI. So, perhaps a certain amount of time would pass before the reinforcement becomes available, and that would be an FI2, meaning reinforcement becomes available after 2 minutes has passed. An FI20 means 20 minutes must pass, and so on. Reinforcement is not automatically delivered at the end of the interval. Instead, reinforcement only becomes available to be delivered and would only be given if the target behavior is emitted at some stage after the time interval has ended. So that when the interval is up, the next time the student emits the behavior, reinforcement is emitted and the interval begins again. As you can imagine, a variable interval schedule has a defined set amount of time for reinforcement. However, you average out varied intervals. Again, it keeps the student from being able to anticipate the reinforcement. Schedules of reinforcement are generally referred to as being either thinner or thicker. Or you might say you thin a schedule of reinforcement. Or you may say that a student is on a thick schedule of reinforcement at the beginning of the program, but that schedule of reinforcement will be thinned. It's important to thin a schedule of reinforcement so that it becomes more natural. Additionally, as mentioned in the past, that all reinforcers should be paired with praise. So you may have a compound schedule of reinforcement. Perhaps you want to praise the student for every emission of the behavior. Therefore, it would be on an FR1 for praise. However, in a token economy, the student may be on a different schedule of reinforcement, such as an FR2. The student would have to emit the behavior every 2 times to receive the token. So, I thank you for your time today, learning about schedules of reinforcement.